they deserve. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of our dedicated TSA workers throughout the country, including in the Massachusetts 7th, who take pride in their essential work, and they call Boston Logan International Airport their employer. They have gone 40 days without pay for their essential work. The Trump administration does not care about protecting our workers or serving the traveling public. This is all a ploy for power and pushing an inhumane agenda against our immigrant neighbors. Now let's go back to Project 2025. I was a co-founder of the Stop Project 2025 task force here in the House. Project 2025 proposed privatizing TSA screening, shifting airport workers away from the government and its protections and into the hands of private contractors. It called for the deunionizing of TSA workers immediately. What we see unfolding right now, this is not a contingency plan. It was always the plan. And to bring in ICE agents who continue to be paid as if they will be able to step in for these highly trained, dedicated, and still unpaid TSA workers is not a solution. Mr. Speaker, these are the lives and livelihoods of our neighbors who are strained by missing paychecks and an inability to put food on the table. Democrats have put forward multiple proposals to keep key agencies such as TSA and FEMA funded while not giving another cent to ICE. And Republicans have refused each and every time. The cruelty is truly the point. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut.
I was transitioning.
Sorry.
Can I get 30 seconds back there?
Please, please.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak to survivors of sexual violence in my district across the country and around the world. As a survivor of sexual violence myself, your stories matter. I'm so sorry for what you've been through, the shame that you carry that was never yours to carry. For too long, survivors have suffered in silence while abusers have carried on without consequence. Last week, our sister survivor, Dolores Huerta, shared her story publicly for the first time. She revealed that she feared if she came forward, there would be no justice or accountability, only the vilification of a workers' movement she had dedicated her life to. The burden, the pain, the silence she carried. For women and mothers, it's far too often an experience that brutal violence, only to hide their pain, wake up every day carrying on for their children, for their community, for their family, while they are shattered inside. No survivor should have to suffer in silence. Society tells us our silence will stop the shame and trauma. It does not. And while I will always respect and fight for survivors who choose privacy if it is part of their healing journey, I want you to know that I believe you. I believe you if your voice shakes. I believe you if it happened decades ago. I believe you if you shared your story in real time or buried it away for years. I believe you. Abusers may think they wield the power through violent acts, but let me tell you, anyone who violates another person in this way is small and broken. They should not be feared. They should be named, shamed, and held accountable for survivors everywhere.
Gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Larson, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. This is a great day for the Larson and Messier family. My granddaughter, Soleil Audrey Messier, turns 1 year old today. She is the sunshine of our life and a bundle of joy, and we wish her and her mom a happy birthday. Mr. Speaker, also on her birthday, I come to the floor as a concerned member of this body and note that we are in a constitutional crisis. A constitutional crisis where this administration is currently ignoring the rule of law. The President of the United States treats the Constitution as though it's a mere suggestion and that he is above the law. Article 1 of the Constitution means little to him. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, there are citizens in this country who care deeply about this. I'm honored to have such a citizen who's one of my constituents, the renowned and legendary and iconic Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader is coming to Washington, D.C. on April the 8th, along with Bruce Fein, a constitutional lawyer and authority on the Constitution, and they'll be holding meetings open to staff and open to people here in the Rayburn building on this campus to talk about governmental accountability. Ralph Nader has long been, throughout his history of public service since he first published Unsafe at Any Speed, where he went after the automobile industry because of what they were doing to the American people and citizens. He's been a voice, and I have to read this, Mr. Speaker. An author, lecturer, attorney, political activist. In 2006, he was cited by The Atlantic as one of the 100 most influential figures in American history. Time magazine called him the U.S.'s toughest customer. The New York Times has said of him that Nader stands apart because he has moved beyond social criticism to effective political action. Beyond criticism to effective political action. And in 1974, a survey conducted by the U.S. News and World Report rated him the 4th most influential person in the United States. I am proud to have him as a constituent. And, Mr. Speaker, for the record, I want to submit these articles that he will be discussing, as will Bruce Fein, on government and corporate accountability on August 8th. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Nader also gets up and says every day, there can be no daily democracy without daily citizenship. That is so true. We just heard Mr. Comer over here talking before about the need for bringing forward whistleblowers. And yet on the Committee on Ways and Means, we've been asking for the whistleblowers who have said that every person, including all the viewers here today's Social Security information has been stolen and placed in an insecure cloud. Not one whistleblower, but two. And who brought them forward? The Trump Judiciary Department, the judicial branch of the Trump administration. And yet we, and I listened to Mr. Comer call for whistleblowers coming forward in Minnesota and California. How about right here in the United States Congress, that we hold accountable people who are looking at every member of Congress's 465 districts, all of their data and information. The public should be outraged. We should be demanding that they come before us as we have. And instead, we voted yesterday, once again, to alleviate resolutions of inquiry, the minority's choice to get answers.
Gentleman's time has expired. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the President. The chair recognizes a gentlewoman from Arizona, Ms. Ansari, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in outrage over the negligence that led to the death of Emmanuel Clifford Damas on March 2nd, 2026. Emmanuel Damas was a 56-year-old Haitian asylum seeker who died after reportedly being denied adequate medical care while in ICE custody after complaining about a toothache to the staff at Florence Correctional Center in Arizona. On March 13th, I traveled to the Florence Correctional Center to conduct an oversight visit. I was met by more than a dozen people, including, to my surprise, private counsel for CoreCivic, the company that operates the facility and profits from mass detention. When I asked basic questions about medical staffing, available care, and what happened to Mr. Damas, there was extreme reluctance, especially from the private lawyer. Under DHS leadership and masterminded by Stephen Miller, the architect of the Trump administration's racist mass deportation agenda, ICE has made it nearly impossible for members of Congress to do our jobs. Despite following ICE's arbitrary requirements, I was denied the ability to speak with detainees that day. I returned on March 20th, and what I learned confirmed the worst. Detainees described Mr. Damas in excruciating pain. They called the medical care, quote, fatal. His face had swollen to the size of a potato. He could no longer speak or walk. Night after night, he begged for help, but was ignored. ICE only checked his blood pressure. By the time he was taken to the hospital, he could barely breathe. Mr. Damas's death was a clear case of medical negligence at the hands of ICE. I have called for a full independent investigation into Mr. Damas's death, including the release of his medical examiner's report, a complete timeline of his care, and all medical records from his time in custody. My heart goes out to the Damas family. They should never have experienced such a tragedy, perpetrated by the U.S. government and funded by our taxpayer dollars. These taxpayer dollars should be going to health care, to food assistance, and programs that support communities. And this is not the only case. My constituent, Yari, is currently detained while suffering from leukemia. She has endured severe medical neglect for over a year. What happened to Mr. Damas could very well happen to her. Every time I visit these detention facilities, it brings me to tears. It's sickening, it is traumatizing, and it is deeply un-American. Firstly, I will not stop until there is an independent investigation into the death of Emmanuel Damas. At least 46 people have died in ICE custody under the Trump regime, and it cannot stand. Second, I will be a hell no on ICE funding. Republicans are blocking essential workers from being paid just to protect a lawless, violent ICE system, while Democrats are pushing to separate ICE funding from the rest of the Department of Homeland Security. Third, I urge my colleagues to sponsor my Drain ICE Act and the Stop Inhumane Conditions in ICE Detention Act. These bills would rescind ICE's $75 billion slush fund and improve oversight, transparency, and conditions in detention centers. Fourth, release my constituent Yari now so she can receive the care that she needs. And finally, it should not be that damn difficult to provide humane conditions. ICE and companies like CoreCivic and Geo Group have billions of dollars at their disposal and yet are choosing to treat human beings in this country like animals. I will keep fighting until the American people know the truth about what is happening in ICE detention centers. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All of us on this floor are heirs to a political system that generations before us believed could be the way to overcome our differences. Is it perfect? Anyone who has been paying even the slightest attention for the past 250 years knows the answer to that question. But each generation has believed in our democracy. All of us elected to this body believe we can make people's lives better, not by fighting in the streets, not by fighting where might makes right, but by coming together, by talking, by arguing, and then by voting. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. So why is it that the majority party seems to be doing everything in its power to prevent voters from having their say? I am actually old enough to remember when the Republican Party was the party of states' rights. Now, unfortunately, it is a party of following the lead of their president, overriding state laws to, quote, nationalize the vote. It's the party of an executive order attempting to eliminate voting by mail under the guise of voter fraud, which we know is virtually non-existent. The SAVE Act and the MEGA Act, all of it to make it harder for voters to cast a ballot. It's sadly become a party of deniers who only believe election results when they win. President Trump's Department of Justice raided an election office in Georgia. He sent FBI agents to seize ballots. Meanwhile, he is attempting to extort Minnesota, California, and others into handing over voter data. His supporters are calling for ICE to surround the polls in November. And we remember he sent an angry mob into this citadel of democracy to hang his vice president and overturn the results of an election he lost in order to prevent a peaceful transfer of power. History will never forget. But the American people always have the last word on who has power in this country. And if there's one thing we know how to do in this country is run elections. We cast our ballots in school gyms, in churches, in community rooms, and more commonly now at the kitchen table. Even President Trump votes by mail. Ours is a decentralized system by design. The framers of the Constitution, flawed as they were, knew that we would one day be faced with this moment. A strong man and his followers ready to throw it all away to avoid another free and fair election. But we won't let them. And my Republican colleagues, many of whom I genuinely like and respect, know better. Privately, I believe they are deeply ashamed by what is happening. And without a doubt, the American people are increasingly disgusted with what they are seeing and experiencing. They know America is less affordable than it was even just a year ago. Support for the president's callous immigration policies has collapsed. The images of federal agents executing Americans in the streets have been horrific. All the while, the president is more obsessed with personal grievances, renaming buildings, starting wars, and exacting revenge on his opponents than making people's lives better. He and his party know this is not a winning political message, so they are resorting to changing the rules to cling to power. But the American people know better. All of us have a duty to protect elections. All of us must let the will of the people prevail. And this Congress must seat the winners of the election regardless of party. I hope there are some colleagues on the other side of the aisle who can still muster the courage to do the same, because our 250-year-old experiment in democracy depends on it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlemen, yields back. The chair recognizes. I'm sorry. Members are reminded again to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to recognize Frank W. Harris III, a United States Marine Corps colonel whose extraordinary life of service spans 3 defining conflicts in our nation's history: World War II, Korea, and the Vietnam War. In each of these wars, Colonel Harris stood in defense of freedoms at moments when it was tested most. Colonel Harris has demonstrated time and again what it means to put nation before self. In doing so, he has embodied the highest ideals of the Marine Corps: honor, courage, and commitment. Having lived through a century of American history, Colonel Harris represents more than remarkable longevity. He represents resilience. To witness 101 years and to have spent so many of them in service to others is itself extraordinary. His life tells the story of perseverance through hardship, faith through uncertainty, and leadership through change. I'm truly honored to have him as my constituent. From this Army Colonel, hoorah and semper fidelis. Mr. Speaker, it is my honor to recognize Patrice Summers on her 26 years of exceptional service to Prince William County. Inspired by her mother's civic engagement, Patrice committed herself to public service from a young age. For over 2 decades, she served as an elections officer and then chief elections officer right here in Prince William County. Patrice is also actively involved in the SEIU Virginia 512 Organizing Committee. Beyond her public sector and union work, Patrice is a devoted caregiver to two of her family members. Her dedication to uplifting her neighbors, her family, and giving back to her community embodies a lifetime of selflessness. I am honored to congratulate her on her well-earned recognition and honor her as this week's Constituent of the Week. Congratulations, and thank you for all that you do. Mr. Speaker, today I honor my Constituent of the Week, Pranav Vedula, a Stafford County, Virginia, for winning the 7th Congressional District App Challenge. The Congressional App Challenge is a nationwide competition that encourages students to explore STEM, coding, and computer science by creating original software applications. Pranav, a senior at Colonial Forge High School, did exactly that by developing an innovative app called Recheck. Recheck is a productivity app designed to assist individuals experiencing memory loss. It allows people living with dementia to build customized to-do lists and help them maintain independence and confidence in their daily lives. I want to congratulate Pranav for using his skills to bring awareness to this critical issue and for his clear commitment to improving people's quality of life. I wish him continued success in his future academic and professional pursuits. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to congratulate my Constituent of the Week, Curry Roberts, on his retirement from serving as the president of the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance at the University of Mary Washington. A Fredericksburg area business leader, Mr. Roberts has dedicated his career to our community. Mr. Roberts has attracted over 6,000 new jobs to the region, laying groundwork for key opportunities for industry to work with local government. In addition to work on the FRA, Mr. Roberts also had a 35-year career in leadership on various nonprofit, public sector, and private sector jobs. Mr. Roberts has always had the back of our communities, and I'm committed to paying this forward in Congress. Congratulations on your retirement, and I wish you well on your next chapter. Mr. Speaker, it is my great honor to recognize Richard E. Toy Sr., a 98-year-old World War II veteran, for his service to our country. Mr. Toy was drafted in 1944 and stationed in Okinawa as a member of the Quartermaster Corps. After being discharged from active duty, he re-enlisted and served in the Navy Reserves until 1950. Mr. Toy has been a steady voice for positive change in Spotsylvania County. He volunteered with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, United Way, and the Spotsylvania County Democratic Committee. As a 25-year Army veteran and a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I know the depth of sacrifice that your service to our country demands. That is why this week I'm proud to recognize Mr. Toy as Constituent of the Week. I thank him for his service to our nation and for his continued work in our community. I will always work to deliver for veterans like him. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Lord, we call on your creative and redemptive aid this day. Inundated as we are by the issues before us, we pray that you, O Lord, would come before us to make a way through. Torrential as the waters of decision may be, we pray that you would speak your word of calm and clear guidance. Enraged as are those who demand attention and answers, Lord, still the roaring waves of anxiety with your word of peace. Remind us that you, the one who spoke into the darkness and brought forth the light and called it good, you who gathered the waters and brought forth the land and saw that it too was good, you who made us in your image that we would have authority over the creatures of your design, you are the one who gives life to all things and has called them all good. It is you who are our strength and our Redeemer. Our help this day is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. We pray in your name that you would grant us your blessing anew on this day. In your eternal name we pray. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Plaskett.
Would you join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
The chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I address the House for up to 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks as needed.
Without objection, the gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize two outstanding members of the Greenville Police Department, Senior Police Officer Mackenzie Ranone and Detective Brandon Peebles, for their service to Eastern North Carolina. Officer Ranone, recently named the department's 2025 Officer of the Year, has demonstrated an exemplary commitment to public safety. Over the last year, she made 98 arrests, conducted more than 2,500 traffic stops, handled 81 crashes, all while serving as lead investigator on serious cases. Just as importantly, she earned the respect of her community through her professionalism, fairness, and dignity. It's especially fitting that we recognize Officer Ranone and the example she sets forth in law enforcement this month, as it is Women's History Month. I also rise to recognize Detective Brandon Peebles as he retires after 24 years of dedicated service. Throughout his career, he played a key role in major investigations, locating missing individuals and dismantling large-scale drug operations. Detective Peebles' legacy is not only in the cases he solved, but in the community that he made safer and helped build and the trust he earned along the way. I thank both Officer Ranone and Detective Peebles for their unwavering commitment for protecting the people of Greenville and keeping us safe. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to recognize National Kidney Month and to speak plainly about it and what it means for my constituents in the Virgin Islands. Chronic kidney disease affects more than 1 in 7 American adults, and when it progresses to end-stage renal disease, Black Americans bear 4 times the burden of other Americans. The Virgin Islands already carries elevated rates of diabetes and hypertension, the primary drivers of kidney failure, and there's a genetic dimension that too few people know about. APOL1-mediated kidney disease, AMKD, is caused by gene variants found almost exclusively in people of West African descent. I'm proud to introduce a resolution and hosted a roundtable along with my fellow Georgetown alum, Alonzo Mourning, and the American Kidney Fund to raise awareness of AMKD. I urge my colleagues to recognize that for thousands of Virgin Islanders and millions of Americans most vulnerable to these diseases, Medicaid and Medicare are lifelines. Any efforts to cut these programs is a direct attack to the most vulnerable among us. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
And extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Lee Polakov, the longtime county attorney for Sarpy County, Nebraska. Lee is a graduate of Omaha Westside High School. He later earned his bachelor's and JD from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Along the way, he was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army. He was eventually appointed to become the Sarpy County Attorney after serving as a deputy in the Sheriff's Office. Through the years, he's managed a team of about 100 staff as he's worked to maintain the integrity of the County Attorney's Office and keep people safe. This year, Lee decided not to run for re-election. Thank you, Lee, for your work leading the Sarpy County Attorney's Office and for serving the people of Sarpy County through the years. Best wishes on your retirement, and I'm sure tonight, like we all are, we will enjoy watching the Big Red defeat the Hawkeyes in the Sweet 16. I yield back.
Gentleman from Nebraska yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Vance Charter School won its first ever North Carolina High School Athletics Association 1A Boys Basketball State Championship, defeating Thomas Jefferson 79-54. Senior Gary Wilkins led the victory with a double-double, 23 points, 14 rebounds. The Knights secured the title with an incredible second-half performance. Hats off to Coach Downey, the Conference Coach of the Year, to his entire coaching staff, the team, fans, and community for making school history. I yield back.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my response.
Without objection, the gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor athletic excellence in Virginia's 5th Congressional District. The University of Virginia women's swimming and diving team captured their 7th consecutive Atlantic Coast Conference Swimming and Diving Championship and their 22nd conference title overall. The team of 29 women won 11 titles, including 7 individual and 4 relay events. Junior Claire Curzon claimed 2 individual events and contributed to 3 relay wins, earning her the honor of being named the championship's most valuable swimmer. This team continues to exemplify discipline, teamwork, and the pursuit of excellence. Congratulations to the athletics, coaches, staff, and the University of Virginia women's swimming and diving team. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman for Virginia yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Virginia is recognized 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to bring to the attention of the House the potential sale of the Middleburg Training Center to the Army. The training center has been a bedrock of the town's local economy since its establishment in 1956. It's one of the leading horse training facilities in the country and a major driver of the local economy. There's really not a horse training facility, public or private, nearby. And to be clear, we welcome the Army and the Old Chasen Detachment in Loudoun, but we need to give the community a voice in this process and consider alternative sites that won't disrupt the local economy, because if this sale goes through, thousands of jobs and tens of millions of dollars that benefit the local economy may be lost. So I ask that we slow this process down and consider an alternative site within the region that can appropriately accommodate the case and horses and provide a turnkey solution for the Army's needs. I yield back.
Gentleman from Virginia yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1131, I call up House Resolution 1128 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title to the resolution.
House Resolution 1128, resolution expressing the support of the House of Representatives for the Department of Homeland Security.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1131, the amendments to the resolution and the preamble printed in the House Report 119-570 are adopted, and the resolution as amended is considered as read. The resolution as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Homeland Security or their respective designees. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. McKenzie, and the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on House Resolution 1128.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of House Resolution 1128, expressing the support of the House of Representatives for the Department of Homeland Security. As we meet today, tens of thousands of federal workers serving on the front lines of our national security are going unpaid. For over 40 days, the men and women we count on to protect passengers, secure our critical infrastructure, and step up during disasters have gone unpaid. For the third time in 6 months, politics is getting in the way of critical American workers, the pay that they've earned. The impact of these political games isn't theoretical. It's causing real-world impacts each and every day. Over 50,000 federal employees are going without paychecks just at TSA alone. Hundreds of employees have quit. Call-out rates are in the double digits, and those who are able to go to work are stuck managing some of the longest lines that we have seen at U.S. airports. And all of this is happening at a time when our nation is preparing to host major events while experiencing heightened national security risks. We have to do better. Today, this House will have an opportunity to vote on my resolution, House Resolution 1128, affirming the importance of DHS, the necessity of funding its agencies and employees, the risks of defunding our security apparatus, and our gratitude to the men and women who are working every day to protect this nation. The House has already passed the Appropriations bill to fully fund DHS twice, both times with bipartisan support. Now it's time for us to speak with one voice, putting aside politics to thank the members of the Coast Guard, FEMA, TSA, and more who are continuing to do their jobs and keep us safe despite many now going nearly a month and a half without a paycheck. Saying yes to funding does not mean saying no to reform. There are concerns that need to be addressed with respect to certain ICE and CBP operations, and when there are opportunities for positive reform, we should work together to achieve it. That's why the DHS funding bill passed twice by this House already features significant new measures aimed at reducing tensions and improving transparency, including new funding for body cameras, de-escalation training, and the DHS Office of Inspector General. Despite this, in the face of grave terror threats against our nation, some are choosing to politicize our national security and hold paychecks hostage until all of their demands are met. Let me be clear. Conversations about common sense reforms at DHS operations are underway. They were underway before this shutdown. They continue to go on, and we will not stop until we get the reforms that the American people are looking for. I look forward to continuing to engage on this issue and working together to achieve a system of immigration enforcement that meets the needs and standards of the American people. But defunding our security apparatus, robbing workers of their paychecks, and creating chaos at our airports across this country does not bring us any closer to achieving those goals. It's time to put the politics aside and get serious. Get serious about our national security. In the meantime, the American people are waiting. Throughout this shutdown, we have seen powerful examples of our communities stepping in to provide for neighbors and those who are impacted. In my district in Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley, we have seen residents coming forward to donate everything from food and diapers to our dedicated TSA agents at our local airport. They're continuing to do their jobs every single day, even as the bills pile up and the savings are stretched thin. To the TSA staff at the ABE airport and to all those impacted workers in my district and throughout the country who are continuing to work, we say thank you. We also thank all of those who stepped up to provide support for them and their families. But here's the reality. We shouldn't have to count on local communities to provide for our federal workers. That's the job of our elected representatives. That's why I and so many in this chamber have voted to provide full funding for DHS. Tens of thousands of federal workers are doing their jobs. We, in a bipartisan fashion, have already done that here in the House of Representatives, but we need bipartisan buy-in from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to make it a reality. We need bipartisan support in the Senate to get Democrats to go along with this full funding of DHS to make sure that this makes its way to the president's desk and gets signed into law. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution, thanking these workers, recognizing the critical nature of their work that they do to protect our communities and our country, and calling for the Department of Homeland Security to receive full funding for its needs to keep our community safe. Thank you, and I yield back.
Does the gentleman reserve?
Yes.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Mr. Speaker, after 40 days of this Republican shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, this symbolic resolution is all my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have got. And let's be clear, we're here today because Republicans who control the House, the Senate, and this House have failed to govern. Their failure and their failure alone has produced this shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. And instead of sitting down to negotiate a serious path forward, they have brought us this, a non-binding resolution that does nothing to reopen the Department of Homeland Security, nothing to pay its workforce, and nothing to make our country safer. A resolution is not a paycheck. A resolution is not accountability. And a resolution is not a substitute for governing. Transportation security officers are working without a paycheck right now. The men and women of FEMA, CISA, and across DHS are showing up every day not knowing when they will be paid. They do not need our words, they need a check. They need this shutdown to end. Let me be clear about where Democrats stand. Democrats have been fighting for the TSA workforce and the broader DHS mission long before Republicans discovered this week that DHS is more than ICE and CBP. I have personally worked for more than a decade to give TSA personnel the same employment protection as other federal workers. And when TSA and the American Federation of Government Employees reached a collective bargaining agreement 2 years ago, I was proud to celebrate that milestone with them. House Republicans voted against those very protections. And now the Trump administration is moving to strip TSOs of their collective bargaining rights. This is a record. This is how we got here. Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, and Corey Lewandowski have tried to turn DHS into a national police force, a weapon for their political agenda, while systematically neglecting the critical missions of TSA, FEMA, CISA, and every other component outside of ICE and CBP. House Republicans watched it happen and failed to say a word, and Americans are less safe for it. We are here because Americans saw their fellow citizens, Renee Good, Alex Preddy, gunned down by masked DHS agents in broad daylight for exercising their First Amendment rights, and the American people have rightly demanded change. We're here because thousands of employees who have already left DHS as a result of Republican mismanagement and intimidation, leaving dangerous staffing gaps in some of the most technically demanding positions in the federal government. House Resolution 1128 does not mention any of that. It does not mention that for over a year, the Trump administration has withheld or delayed Homeland Security grants to state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. Even before this shutdown, disaster survivors have had to wait for relief, and first responders have lacked the resources they need to protect their communities. Words on paper will not fix that. Only real action will. The resolution does not mention that DHS and FEMA continue to withhold counterterrorism funding for nonprofits, synagogues, churches, mosques, the very institutions that have been targeted by terrorist attack on American soil. A resolution is not protection. Funding is protection. The resolution does not mention that the administration has politicized DHS's cybersecurity mission, leaving our critical infrastructure and federal networks more vulnerable than they should be. This resolution will not secure a single network. Only leadership and funding will do that. So let us tell the whole story here. The Trump administration caused this shutdown. The Trump administration has disparaged and diminished the DHS workforce since the first day it took office. The Trump administration has made the American people less safe in the process. House Democrats have been at the negotiating table from the very beginning. We want DHS funded and reopened. We've said so consistently, and if House Republicans were sincere about ending the shutdown their own failures created, they would work with us, fund the full mission of DHS, and answer the public's legitimate demand for accountability and reform of ICE and CBP. Some Republicans are beginning to see the light, but who remains standing in the way? Donald Trump. Don't just take my word for it. Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana told Fox News on Monday night that when Senate Republican leader Thune informed the president that his conference was prepared to accept the Democratic compromise position, the president said, and I quote, "No deals with the Democrats." And it gets worse. The president is now attacking new conditions to ending the shutdown, including his so-called SAVE Act. That makes no sense. It has nothing to do with funding the DHS workforce. And yet, instead of showing any leadership, House Republicans are backing the president's order to deploy untrained ICE officers into airports, contrary to their mission, contrary to common sense, apparently to intimidate travelers. In fact, we've learned that in airports where ICE has been deployed, waiting times at TSA screening checkpoints have actually gone up. And while all of that is happening, we are here debating a non-binding resolution that will not pay a single TSO, will not reopen a single office, and will not make a single American safer. The American people deserve better than this Republican failure theater. The DHS workforce deserves better. I urge my colleagues to stop the performance and start governing. Not a resolution, but action. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we just heard was not, in fact, the whole story. The previous speaker mentioned that he wanted to tell the whole story. Well, I think it is important that we get all the facts on the record. What the gentleman left out was that he himself voted twice against funding for DHS. This resolution is not in lieu of the opportunity to vote for funding. We're going to give you another opportunity, but you're going to vote no again. That needs to be on the record. That is the full story. The Democrats in this House want to stand in the way of keeping America safe. The Democrats in the Senate want to change the rules of the game. What they choose to do is they go out there and demand all kinds of unrealistic conditions that would actually hamstring DHS, keep our country less safe, and are totally unworkable in practice. We, as Republicans, have offered full funding. We have offered partial funding with reforms. We have said here is the way that we can make this system not only better, but keep America safe while making these reasonable, common sense reforms. What do? They dismiss them out of hand. He said Donald Trump, our president, our duly elected president, has shot down these opposition proposals. That is not the case. The Senate, the Congress are the ones that are going to advance these pieces of legislation to the president's desk. The Senate has put forward those proposals to Democrat colleagues, and what did they do? They are the ones that rejected the latest offer. So we have extended the olive branch. We have extended our hand and said, come together, work with us, fully fund Department of Homeland Security. They will never fund ICE because of their radical left. They are beholden to the fringe in their party that will do everything to protect and promote illegal immigrants over the interests of American citizens. But it should be noted that ICE actually does some very critical work in our local community. Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. What does that do as a part of ICE? They go out and protect people against human trafficking, drug smuggling. That's what you're opposed to? It's ludicrous. Mr. Speaker, we have to fully fund ICE. The previous gentleman said that this resolution doesn't do enough. I agree. The resolution is a way to thank and recognize DHS and all of its employees for the great work they do to keep us safe. We should agree on that. We should also agree on getting funding to fully fund the operations of DHS. You voted against it twice. You're going to vote against it again, and you're going to leave the American people less safe. So that's the full story. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would like to yield to the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of House Resolution 1128, expressing support of the House of Representatives for the Department of Homeland Security. For 41 days, the Department of Homeland Security has been operating without the necessary funding to carry out its core mission. Tens of thousands of dedicated employees across the country are working without pay, while our national security sits at an elevated threat level. The men and women of the 22 federal agencies whose funding is tied to DHS, they continue to show up every day, standing watch over our borders, protecting our transportation systems, and safeguarding the American people despite missing multiple paychecks. Their commitment to our nation is unwavering, and we owe them more than our gratitude. We owe them action. We owe them a paycheck for their service. Congress must fund DHS and bring this shutdown to an end so that our first responders and our federal law enforcement officials can refocus on the very real public threats we face. The American people deserve and the American people demand that Democrats end this political theater and that Democrats step up and join Republicans in fully funding the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves his time. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves his time. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I want to help my colleague out on the other side. Everybody in this country knows that Donald Trump is running everything. Nothing happens in Washington without Donald Trump's approval. Legislation is not passed unless he agrees with it. If they were strong enough, they would admit that. But Republicans run the executive branch, they run both bodies of the legislative branch. And so now you blame Democrats on your inability to get things done. Let me help you out. This resolution does not pay one TSO or FEMA or CISA employee. It doesn't pay a mortgage. It doesn't pay a car note. It doesn't buy groceries. Quit pretending like you're doing something to help the people. Before this debate is over, I'm going to give you a chance to put your mouth where it ought to be on this resolution. But for this point, HSI mission is not to walk in airports and assist ICE. That is not why they were created. They're an investigatory body. They ought to be out here in communities finding bad people. You have changed their mission. Your president, has changed their mission, so they are now doing things for which they were not trained to do. For the record, our loyal and faithful TSOs that you say you love, their training is from 4 to 6 months to make sure that individuals who get on planes don't have anything in their possessions that will bring it down. Our ICE agents are trained for 47 days. So now you can tell me how someone who's trained for 47 days is going to help somebody do a job where the training is almost double what's required. The technology that they do in the screening, no ICE agent performs that. No TSO walks up and down an airport trying to keep crowds in line. That's not their mission. Nor should they be harming people in communities like we've seen with our own eyes. And so let's get back to basics. If you really want to help our loyal TSOs, as you say, then let's pay them. Put a resolution on the floor that says, I want to pay them right now. But you're afraid to do it because the White House is calling the shots. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. I would remind speakers on both sides of this argument that they please understand they're to direct their comments to the chairman under House rules. For what reason? Excuse me, gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate this spirited debate, but it is important when you're debating somebody to call out their half-truths and their deflections. The half-truth that this gentleman speaks of is that Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, and so that gives us total ability to pass whatever we want. That is not the case. We know that in the Senate, you need 60 votes to get something passed in policy. So you do need bipartisan support to actually get something passed into law and help the American people. We are asking, Mr. Speaker, for our Democrat colleagues to come along and join us in fully funding the operations of DHS. Now, the deflection comes when he tells you all about the important and critical training and the ways that DHS operates. We are talking not only in this resolution, but also in an appropriations bill that is going to follow about fully funding the operations of ICE. The gentleman tries to obfuscate, tries to change the conversation. The bottom line is that that funding for DHS was voted on twice in this House already. We voted for it in a bipartisan fashion, and we are going to give all members of this body the ability to vote on it for a third time. With that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Van Epps.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, Democrats' government shutdown has now lasted over 40 days, and it will have lasting consequences. This goes far beyond long airport lines. Only a fraction of the cybersecurity and infrastructure security agencies' workforce remains on duty, weakening our ability to defend critical infrastructure from threats like Iranian cyber retaliation. Modern conflicts aren't limited to air, sea, and land. Adversaries now target critical infrastructure, including energy grids, financial systems, transportation networks, government systems, and healthcare services. Democrats say they want a deal. Well, let's look at their deals. Under the Biden administration, officials apprehended a Venezuelan illegal alien at the border and still released him into the country. Now, 3 years later, that man killed an innocent 18-year-old American, Sheridan Gorman. This is the consequence of Biden's failed policy. When the Democrats are in control, they prioritize criminals over citizens. Now the damage extends beyond our streets. This shutdown is setting back American shipbuilding and weakening our maritime readiness. The Coast Guard can't pay shipyards to maintain its fleet, and contractors are reconsidering whether it is even worth doing business with the federal government. Think about that. It is now too risky to work with the United States Coast Guard. That is the direct result of Democrats using DHS as leverage. They put Americans at risk to advance a political agenda. As we approach the 25th anniversary of September 11th, we should be strengthening Homeland Security. Instead, Democrats are weakening it. After 3 shutdowns in a single fiscal year, their priorities are clear. They care more about politics than protecting the American people. I yield back my time and reserve my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves his time. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to, reserve.
Does the gentleman wish to reserve his time?
Right.
The gentleman from Mississippi.
I yield myself as much time.
Excuse me, you would yield yourself such time as you choose.
Absolutely.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much. For the record, Mr. Speaker, the CISA employees, over 1,000, were discharged by the DOJ committee before the shutdown occurred. We want to make sure the record reflects that. So this shutdown does not comport with what was said by the Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, House Republicans actually have the ability to stop this performance art and stop the shutdown of their own making today. We should send the compromise bill to reopen DHS to the Senate right now. Let us pay our TSA, FEMA, and CISA personnel who will continue to reform ICE and CBP as the American people demand. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Appropriations and Budget be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 7481, the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act of 2026, and asks for its immediate consideration in the House.
I would advise the gentleman that the majority member, in this case, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, would need to agree to that. And if he does not choose to yield for that purpose, then the gentleman would be recognized for his continuation. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
So what is your I didn't understand you.
The gentleman who sits in the majority seat from Pennsylvania would have to agree with your unanimous request, would have to yield to that request. And the gentleman evidently chooses not to.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there you have it. House Republicans have an hour to debate a non-binding symbolic resolution, but not even a few seconds to do the job that would actually pay our DHS workers. This is the Republican DHS shutdown. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Mississippi reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is so critically important that we fund and fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. The best way to do that is in a bipartisan fashion. That's why this House of Representatives has already voted twice with bipartisan support to advance that legislation over to the Senate. The previous speaker, his wishful thinking, his off-the-wall Rube Goldberg proposal saying that Republicans in the House are somehow opposing his scheme, it's just simply unrealistic. The American people don't buy it because there is not something before us that has the bipartisan support of over 218 votes to pass. That's not what he's proposing. What we have is the pragmatic, common-sense solution that had the bipartisan support to pass twice. Join us in that effort. Join us, please. Please. I don't understand, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will confine his remarks to the chairman of the committee. The gentleman needs to be in line with House rules. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate all this discussion. Again, we have to do what is best for the American people. We already have something that is advanced. We're going to continue that conversation. In addition to that, we can continue to thank and recognize all of our workers at DHS. And I will yield 2 minutes of my time to the gentleman of Colorado, Mr. Evans.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm a proud co-sponsor of this resolution to support full funding for the Department of Homeland Security. Not many policy debates in this chamber are simple, but this one is. The Department of Homeland Security needs funding now. In just 6 months, Mr. Speaker, Democrats have shut down our government twice, and now they claim that shutting down DHS makes us safer. As someone who spent 12 years in the Army and another 10 years as a police officer, I know this is the furthest from the truth you can be. In fact, I left law enforcement and serve now in Congress because for years, Democrats pushed to defund the police. They championed defunding the police, knowing the consequences that it has on public safety. And today, Mr. Speaker, that same pattern continues, this time by defunding the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Speaker, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. House Republicans have passed Homeland Security appropriations funding twice, H.R. 7147 and H.R. 7747. Twice, this funding was rejected by House Democrats and repeatedly blocked by Senate Democrats. Facts matter. Now, because the department is unfunded, FEMA's local pre-disaster planning is halted right as Colorado enters wildfire season. CISA, which protects Americans from cyber attacks, is impaired. The Coast Guard, essential in combating drug trafficking, I will add, that killed 400,000 Americans under the open border policies of my colleagues across the aisle, the Coast Guard is weakened. The Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which provides the training to our federal agents, is impaired. And if that's not bad enough, twice Democrats have voted against funding the Department of Homeland Security and preventing our TSA officers from receiving a paycheck. Mr. Speaker, Democrats need to stop their reckless practice of holding paychecks hostage for their political agenda. We need to fund the department, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves his time. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Maryland.
Will the gentleman who just spoke yield? Will the gentleman who just spoke, who's walking down, would you yield?
The gentleman has yielded back his time, and we have reserved that time. Well, you've not been recognized yet, sir. How much time would you
How
like
much
to?
time as he may consume?
You would like to recognize the distinguished gentleman from Maryland. The distinguished gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman to whom I was addressing my question apparently doesn't want to yield and left the floor at the advice probably of somebody else. We ought to speak the truth. Even if you're new, I've been here a little longer, and there is a way to fund the TSA, to fund Secret Service, and it's no sham. We don't even have to sign the discharge petition. Your Speaker, Mr. Speaker, just needs to bring the bill to the floor. It funds everybody in the Department of Homeland Security other than ICE and CBP. You know that.
The gentleman will yield. The gentleman will confine his remarks to the chairman of the committee. These are House rules, and the gentleman needs to subscribe to those. The
I
gentleman's
addressed the recognized. Speaker. I said, Mr. Speaker. Now, that doesn't mean I can't look at other people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I addressed you directly, and I don't want this out of my time.
The gentleman is recognized, confining his remarks to the chairman of the committee.
We're in the House.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the argument being made on the other side is not accurate. I will give them the benefit of the doubt because perhaps they don't know it's not accurate. We have over 110 people who are prepared to vote for all of the funding in DHS other than one of the components, both of the components, who recently have snatched people off the streets of America wearing hoods and no badges and putting them into unmarked cars. Yes, we're not for that. The gentleman said he was, that I asked to yield, said he was a law enforcement officer. I was going to ask him whether he ever wore a mask during the course of his duties. Not a gas mask, a mask to keep him secret. I'm going to ask him whether he ever went into a home without a warrant, inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States. Yes, we want to defend the Constitution of the United States. And by the way, unless you missed it, when we passed the appropriation bills that have funded most of government, we did so and we took DHS out and told you we're not for that. So what you continue to do is to bring to this floor something we have told you we are not for. Mr. Speaker, if the Speaker of the House brought that bill to the floor to fund all of DHS's components except those two agencies, it would pass overwhelmingly today within this hour. I guarantee it, as a former majority leader, assuming that all of you say, oh, we want to fund TSA, we want to fund Secret Service, we want to fund Coast Guard, assuming that you would follow your rhetoric. It can be done like that. I say that as a majority of leader of this House for 8 years, and I know of what I speak. Mr. Speaker, they talk about shutdowns. Under Ronald Reagan, and there were 8 shutdowns. They lasted for an average, Mr. Speaker, of 1.3 days. 9 of those were weekend days. Why? Because Ronald Reagan and we Democrats who controlled the House were prepared to go to the table and make an agreement. And if we couldn't make an agreement, we nevertheless funded government. This president has said numerous times, Mr. Speaker, I'd welcome shutdowning the government. All of it. All of it. So those of you who come to the floor and try to, like Pontius Pilate, wash responsibility away and blame it on Democrats, because, yes, there are things which we very strongly disagree, and that is the violation of the Constitution, the violation of statutes, and I would have asked my law enforcement friend, the violation of norms followed by every police department in America. So I am tired of hearing totally inaccurate information. Some fraud bill. That's not the word that was used, Mr. Speaker, but that was implied. The bill that we want is no fraud. The bill we want would fund TSA, Secret Service, Coast Guard, CISA, and all other agencies in DHS tomorrow. But what is the majority bringing to the floor, Mr. Speaker? A bill that has failed 3 times. Why? Because we don't want warrantless searches. We don't want people's doors being broken down without probable cause. We don't want people apprehended by masked people. You know, I grew up in an era when I was a young man where there were a lot of people wearing masks going around assaulting people. We didn't call them police. Try to be honest with the American people. Mr. Speaker, we owe them that. Tell them, look, we're afraid that if we fund all of these components, of which we all talk and support, if we do that, then we won't make as good a deal on DHS. We won't keep them immune from following the Constitution. We won't keep them immune from following the laws of their state. We won't keep them immune for the norms that police follow. Don't come to this floor and be dishonest and say we're shutting down the government. We're not. But we sure do want to raise the question and have a debate about whether we follow the Constitution in terms of law enforcement in this country. That's what our country. You know why you have warrants? Because King George could go into any house, anytime, every time that he wanted to. And the Founding Fathers thought that was wrong. I see my chairman is standing, so he may want to speak himself and not have me take all the time. But I would plead with my Republican friends, Mr. Speaker, be honest. You're holding off that bill because you think tactically it will undermine what the ICE is doing, undermining that 2, 3, 4, 5 people were killed by officers not following the law. Don't come here pretending that Democrats somehow are shutting down. By the way, when Joe Biden was president of the United States, you know how many shutdowns there were? Mr. Speaker, the answer to that is 0. 0. Let's fund the important services that the American people deserve. Let's have the Speaker either put the bill on the floor, have 10 Republicans sign the discharge petition, we'll put it on the floor, and we'll pass it overwhelmingly, I predict. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for giving me some time to try to correct the record that is being, unfortunately, made poorly on this floor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to how much time is remaining on both sides?
Gentleman has 8 minutes remaining.
And
gentleman from Pennsylvania has 13 minutes remaining, sir.
Thank you. Then I reserve.
The gentleman from Mississippi reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I hope my colleague that just spoke can stick around to hear this. It is important that we are on the same page. My esteemed colleague was here years ago during 9/11. The reason why we established the Department of Homeland Security, as you know, is to break down silos. What you are advocating for is building up walls, siloing off parts of our Department of Homeland Security, and leaving our country less safe. That was the whole point of having a unified Department of Homeland Security. So you know that history, or our previous speaker, Mr. Chairman, Chairman of the Committee on the Whole, knows that history. He knows that full well. Everybody who was here after 9/11 knows that full well. So to go back on that and try to break down these silos and say that we want to fund everything, but we want to defund federal law enforcement, that is an affront to our national security. That is an affront to the American people. And what I am saying, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. We have that resolution on the floor. We are going to offer it up again. We are going to give them a third opportunity, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I am so grateful that my colleagues stuck around to hear that it is a disastrous idea to build silos in the Department of Homeland Security, to defund federal law enforcement. That is absolutely accurate, and we need that on the record, that those statements were damaging to what our national security apparatus does every single day to keep us safe. So, Mr. Speaker, I am going to now yield 2.5 minutes of my time to the gentleman from California, Mr. Fong.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of House Resolution 1128, expressing the support of the House of Representatives for the Department of Homeland Security. As lawmakers, we have a fundamental obligation to govern responsibly and to protect our communities from emerging threats, both foreign and domestic. Twice on this very House floor, we passed a bipartisan funding package for the Department of Homeland Security. However, Senate Democrats have chosen to walk away from that bipartisan bicameral deal, threatening operations that ensure the safety and security of American communities, from our transportation systems to our cybersecurity and critical infrastructure and emergency response capabilities. Today marks 41 days since Democrats made the reckless decision to shut down the Department of Homeland Security. A prolonged government shutdown undermines our national security, creates financial hardship for Homeland Security workers and their families, and leaves critical emergency response and preparedness efforts at risk. Yet again, dedicated public servants like TSA security officers, Coast Guard civilian personnel, FEMA personnel, and cybersecurity teams are working without the certainty of their next paycheck while others have been furloughed. That is why my colleagues and I on this side of the aisle have consistently voted to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to hear directly from frontline security agencies on the negative impact this shutdown has had on their missions and workforce. As TSA's deputy administrator shared, quote, "What I'm hearing from our workforce is that what's happening is nothing short of cruel. It is dangerous for Democrats to keep weakening our national security posture for their own political gain, especially amid a heightened threat environment. Every day this shutdown continues, our nation's security is put at greater risk, and the men and women who protect us are further sidelined. The 260,000 Americans employed by DHS should be focused on their no-fail mission to keep our country safe, not worrying about how they will pay their bills, rent, groceries, or find a job in order to find another job in order to do so. Every agency tasked with America's Homeland Security needs to be operating at full strength right now. Today, I reaffirm my commitment to public safety and those sworn to uphold it. I urge my colleagues across the aisle to come to their senses, immediately reopen the Department of Homeland Security, and end this shutdown immediately. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Maryland.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman on the other side, Mr. Speaker, asked me to come back. I came back. He made a comment. I wanted to correct him. He would not yield for that purpose. 86% of ICE is being funded. There are no silos being undermined, except by not funding all the other agencies that we are prepared to support. No silos. 85% of CBP is funded. You funded, Mr. Speaker, in reconciliation at 3 times, essentially, what the annual appropriation was for those 2 agencies. So there ought not to be, again, this Pontius Pilate hand-wringing that somehow we've shut down those 2 agencies. We have not. You provided for that, Mr. Speaker, and they are funded. The question is, do you still want to use as a political tactic shutting down all the other agencies? And I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Mississippi reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, appreciate the spirited debate with my colleagues, especially the past speaker. We appreciate his experience. He has been a member of this body since even before I was born. I'm 43 years old now. He has been a member of this chamber for longer than that. He has been elected in 1981, and we appreciate his experience and his knowledge that he brings to this debate. But when somebody is wrong, regardless of their age or experience, it is our obligation to recognize that and call that out. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes of my time to Mr. Fine from the great state of Florida.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And actually, I have an anecdote as well. 35 years ago, when the previous speaker from the Democratic side was here as a member of Congress, I was a 16-year-old page wandering around the floor in a blue blazer and a khaki pair of pants. So it's an interesting moment for me, because what he said is, let's fund, I quote, let's fund the important services the American people deserve. Let's talk about important services they don't think they deserve. Over the last 4 years, 20 million illegal immigrants came into this country. And those illegal immigrants have killed 1,400 Americans. Let me give you just a few of their names. Kate Steinle, who is 32 years old in California. Laken Riley, who was 22 years old in Athens, Georgia. Rachel Morin, who was 37 years old in Bel Air, Maryland. Jocelyn Nungary, who was 12 years old in Houston, Texas. Liz Medina, who was 16, also in Texas. But those apparently aren't services that need to be funded. Since the conflict in Iran began, there have been 4 terrorist attacks in 4 separate states by 4 unaffiliated groups. They were working independently. Let's say their names. Those are apparently not important services that the American people need to know. Ryder Harrington, 19. Savitha Shah, 21. Jorge Peterson, 30. And Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Shaw in Virginia. Those are apparently stopping that are not important services the American people deserve. While I stood here waiting to speak, the government announced that they've arrested 2 Chinese people in the state of Florida for attempting to put an IED outside of a military base. We're told funding 86% of the Department of Homeland Security is funding all of the Department of Homeland Security. That is not true. And also, as I stood here, I read one other thing, that in New York City, a 4-time deported Honduran illegal alien was charged with murder for shoving an 83-year-old U.S. Air Force veteran onto the subway tracks in New York City. But apparently protecting him is not an important service the American people deserve. What I have learned in this debate is Democrats care about 3 things: Muslim terrorists, Somali pirates, and illegal immigrants. And what's clear to me, if we want to fund the Department of Homeland Security and get them on board, there's one simple solution. Have all of those TSA agents declare they are illegal immigrants, because then they'll rush to get the money over to them to get them funded. It is not right to keep the government closed. If you want changes in policy, let's have those debates. But the same people who demand these folks not be masked spent years demanding the rest of us get arrested if we weren't willing to wear them. The hypocrisy is stunning, and the American people are not being served. We need the job to get done. We need to get the whole thing funded, and I support the resolution fully. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary question. How much time do we have remaining on our side?
And has 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this shutdown is a result of Republicans' failure to govern. Democrats have been at the negotiating table for weeks, and the American people are demanding accountability and reform from ICE and CBP. We cannot forget that 2 American citizens got killed by masked federal agents for merely exercising their First Amendment rights on the streets of a major city, and then their government turned around and called them domestic terrorists without any evidence whatsoever. That cannot happen again, and Democrats are here fighting to prevent it from happening ever again. But where are Republicans? They are here offering symbolic resolutions to score political points for the White House. They are not reforming ICE and CBP. They're not negotiating. If you want Democrats to vote with you, you'll have to earn our vote. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Mississippi reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, again, we are offering this resolution to thank our great men and women of the Department of Homeland Security for all their work during this Democratic shutdown where they're not receiving funding and their paychecks to support them and their families. And so we have this resolution and also the resolution for appropriating all the funding. And those are both going to come before the full House, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support. They've had bipartisan support for the appropriations in the past, and hopefully we'll get that again this time. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes of my time to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you to my colleague for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, I have a message for the American people. Dear Americans, Democrats do not care about your safety. They're displaying it this right before our very eyes. Democrats do, obviously before our own eyes, practice political gamesmanship rather than provide real security for our homeland safety. At a time when our nation faces threat after threat, it's imperative that we have a strong, fully funded Department of Homeland Security. The brave men and women of DHS work hard every single day to keep Americans safe. They have earned our support. And how do Democrats repay them for their work? They shut down the Department of Homeland Security. I'm proud to stand in support of this resolution today to shine a light on the great work that they do. However, it cannot go unsaid that many of my Democrat colleagues who may vote in favor of this resolution today will still continue to maintain that DHS would be unfunded, as they have voted 4 separate times against its reopening purely because of political games. At a time when our nation faces increased security risk, Democrats are choosing politics over our nation's safety. They're giving us one crystal clear message. They do not care about American safety. If they did, wouldn't the agency whose sole job is to protect America be funded at this very hour? Securing America's safety and ensuring brave employees of the Department of Homeland Security receive the funding they undoubtedly deserve must happen, and it must happen soon. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair and not to a perceived viewing audience. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. recognize myself for as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, one of President Trump's top informal advisors, Steve Bannon, recently said that the president's deployment of ICE to the nation's airport was a, quote, test run before ICE's deployment to election sites during November's midterm election. Now, why, Mr. Speaker, would immigration and customs enforcement be needed at state and locally run election sites? The Trump administration has tried to make DHS and ICE into their private, politically motivated national police to intimidate travelers at the airport now and voters at the ballot box in November. That is why the American people are demanding that we reform ICE. But we could reopen the department today while those reforms continue to be worked on. House Republicans and Donald Trump, however, are standing in the way. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This conversation has been rewarding and enlightening for the American people. We have heard half-truths, deflections, obfuscations from the other side throughout our conversation today. We also hear fear-mongering. What we need are pragmatic, common-sense solutions that have bipartisan support. That's what we have. With the DHS funding appropriations that we've already passed through the House, that we're going to have an opportunity to vote on again, it is a chance to give the American people the results that they're looking for. It's not a conversation, it is fact. And so, Mr. Speaker, it has been great to hear the other side put themselves on the record for not fully funding parts of the Department of Homeland Security, for building up silos, for advocacy about defunding law enforcement. That's what we've heard here today. It's shocking, but I think it's enlightening for the American people to see that contrast and have it on full display. I wish that we had more than an hour to have this debate. I think this is something that every American should see. Republicans coming together to support national security, to fund our workers, to give our workers, the American people, the paychecks that they deserve for the work that they're doing. But, Mr. Speaker, the other side stands in objection as an obstacle to this common sense solution every single day. At this point, I will reserve the balance of my time, but I do want to thank you and thank the other side for putting this contrast on full display for the American people.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close at this time.
The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Is the speaker on the other side prepared to close too?
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers as well, and am prepared to close after the gentleman from Mississippi closes.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time. Republican failures have shut down the Department of Homeland Security for more than 40 days. But before this Republican shutdown, the Trump administration did its dead-level best to allow and hollow out the department and make America less safe. At least 2,000 permanent FEMA staff have left that agency since the day Donald Trump took office. $275 million in nonprofit security grant program funds remain stuck at DHS and FEMA instead of helping high-risk nonprofit organizations like churches, mosques, and synagogues. At the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the Trump administration terminated, reassigned, or pressured into resigning nearly 1,000 employees. The former CISA acting director said that the vacancy rate at the agency hampered its ability to fully support national security objectives. The President's fiscal year 2026 budget called for roughly $500 million in cuts to CISA, including cutting programs meant to secure our elections from foreign bad actors. At TSA, the Trump administration has moved to cut collective bargaining agreements meant to improve working conditions for the personnel keeping our airways safe. For over a year, Republicans have failed DHS and the American people at every turn. Yet Americans are shameless enough to lecture us about supporting DHS. Republicans have the power to end this shutdown today. Instead of wasting time on symbolic resolution, they could pass H.R. 7481, the Democratic compromise proposal that would allow DHS to reopen while we continue to work on reforms to ICE and CBP. But instead, Republicans seem almost addicted to failure. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, take yes for an answer. Let's stop the failure theater and reopen DHS today. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Mississippi yields. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I couldn't agree with my colleague more that we should fund and fully fund the Department of Homeland Security today. That is why we're going to have the opportunity for every member to vote yes on that resolution to fully fund it. We're also going to have the opportunity, in addition to that funding, to give our members the opportunity to vote in full support of the men and women at the Department of Homeland Security and all the great work they do every single day. I would encourage a yes vote on both of those resolutions, certainly on the one that's being debated here before us, House Resolution 1128. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1131, the previous question is ordered on the resolution and the preamble as amended. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is agreed to. The gentleman from Mississippi.
On that, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays have been requested. Those in favor of vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number have been risen. The yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purposes does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1131, I call up Bill H.R. 8029 to pay our Homeland Defenders Act and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8029, a bill making appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1131, the bill is considered read. The bill should be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, and the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Laurel, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last year, Democrats initiated the longest full government shutdown in American history. It severely impacted families, agencies, personnel, and services across the nation. What should have been a lesson on how not to treat hardworking Americans has instead become routine for Senator Schumer and Senate Democrats. Today marks day 41 of the Department of Homeland Security shutdown, already the longest partial shutdown on record. And in just 3 days, it will surpass even last year's historic lapse, further compounding the harm to our national security and the workforce charged with protecting it. There are many ways to measure the damage, yet every metric reflects a burden on our citizens. We can look at time. DHS has been comprehensively shut down for close to 50% of the fiscal year. That's nearly 100 days of dysfunction and counting. We can look at personnel. More than 100,000 employees have missed paychecks. We can look at travel. Airports across the nation are experiencing severe lines and delays as TSA call-out rates soar. We can look at contingency fund. FEMA's disaster relief fund is nearly empty. The list doesn't end there, yet it makes clear exactly what Senate Democrats have chosen. But today, we are once again providing our colleagues across the aisle an opportunity to stop the chaos. Life doesn't offer many second chances, but here on the House floor this afternoon offers many Democrats a third chance to get it right. I'm proud to say my friend and fellow appropriator, Mr. Ciscomani from Arizona, has introduced a Pay Our Homeland Defenders Act. This legislation comprehensively funds DHS. It resources critical security efforts, pays personnel, and gets our front line back on operational strength. It doesn't just pick and choose which parts of Homeland Security matter. It ensures that missions and personnel are supported across the board for the rest of the fiscal year. Representative Ciscomani put it plainly in a recent piece that he wrote, saying, quote, "This should not be a partisan issue. Paying the people who protect our country should be the bare minimum expectation of a functioning government. It is about respect, it is about responsibility, and most importantly, it's about safety." Mr. Ciscomani got it exactly right. This isn't a game. We're dealing with real security objectives, real community impacts, and real livelihoods. Congress has a basic responsibility: fund the government, pay the workforce, and protect the homeland. Republicans have consistently voted to meet that duty, and I urge Senate Democrats to follow our example. With that, I call on everyone to vote yes, end this shutdown, and keep our nation safe. I reserve the balance of my time, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Before I make my remarks on the bill, I'd like to take a moment to praise the work of one of our staff who is leaving the committee next week. Jocelyn Hunn is a trailblazer. In 1983, she became the second woman to ever work as a professional staff member for the House Appropriations Committee. In her career, she fought to preserve our natural and cultural resources, ensure access to clean air and water, improve services provided to all Americans to advance their well-being and help them to achieve a better life. Jocelyn is retiring from a career in government service on Tuesday. The Interior Subcommittee, the entire House of Representatives, owe you a debt of gratitude for your tireless work, and that began more than 4 decades ago. Godspeed, my friend. It's been a pleasure to work with you. It really has. Thank you so much. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to this twice doomed legislation. What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over and again, expecting a different result. This is not a serious effort. It is just more political theater. Here is the truth. The president has given up on funding DHS. He said earlier this week that any deal Congress makes, and I quote, "I'm pretty much not happy with it," end quote. And then he said to Republicans, "Don't make a deal with the Democrats." Does that sound like someone who wants to end this crisis and to pay TSA workers? Madam Speaker, the Congress is on its own. The only way we are getting out of this logjam is if we work together to exercise our power of the purse. The talks in the Senate have all but fallen apart. The president is refusing to get behind anything. Tomorrow will mark the second full paycheck that TSA workers and others across DHS will miss. I might just make a note here because I think it's important to say something about this. In fact, at this moment, ICE and CBP, 85% of ICE and CBP are being paid. Secret Service, 75%. Coast Guard, 85%. TSA workers is 0. But the TSA administrator confirmed yesterday that the department made the decision not to pay TSA workers. The department made that decision, I'm sure in concert with the President of the United States, that these are folks who are expendable. We don't have to pay them. Let's pay the others and leave them on their own. Again, not someone or some department that wants to or cares about TSA workers. I have put forward a proposal that I honestly believe is a reasonable middle ground between the two sides of this discussion. Democrats do not want to provide more funding for ICE or CBP without legally binding policy changes that protect our communities. Republicans are opposed to many of these changes and want to fund ICE and CBP without any new protections. Neither side disagrees over funding for TSA or FEMA or the Coast Guard or other parts of DHS. What we are caught up on is whether or not we can deal with ICE and CBP separately, or if we have to fund everything all at once. I do not believe it must be all or nothing. My proposal, which I introduced over a month ago, funds the parts of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, that we all agree on. It funds TSA so that these workers can get paid. They can pay their bills, they can stop sleeping in their cars, they can avoid evictions, and that we can put an end to the long lines at airport security. It funds FEMA so that we can replenish the disaster relief fund and ensure that our communities are prepared for the next natural disaster. It fully funds cybersecurity so that we are equipped to prevent or respond to any threat that comes our way. It separates out the funding for ICE and CBP for the time being, just for the time being, so that we can negotiate on that issue without holding the rest of the department hostage. I have been listening to the debates over this impasse. I believe some of my Republican colleagues are under the impression that my proposal is designed to permanently shutter ICE and CBP. That is not true. That is not the case. We will have to pass a bill to fund those agencies, and we will do so when we have come together on an agreement that establishes reasonable protections against abuse. Reasonable protections, I might add, which the vast majority of Americans support. We cannot have masked, armed federal agents roaming our communities, breaking down doors with no warrants, arresting people with no explanation, and yes, even murdering Americans in the streets. In the meantime, there is no reason to keep the rest of the department shut down. At the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would have replaced the text of the doomed Republican proposal with the text of my bill to fund the parts of DHS over which there is no disagreement. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment, and I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Before I yield to my next speaker, I would just want to associate myself with the remarks of my good friend, the ranking member, in terms of her retiring staffer, Jocelyn Hahn, and join my friend in congratulating her on her distinguished service and wishing her well in the next chapter of her life. With that, Madam Speaker, I would like to yield 1 minute to distinguished Majority Leader, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank my friend from Oklahoma, the great chairman of the Appropriations Committee, for yielding. I rise in strong support of Congressman Ciscomani's bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security. And Madam Speaker, this is a bill that should have passed weeks and weeks ago. In fact, today will mark the third time that this House has voted to fully fund the department. And in case you want to know how that vote went, there's been a record vote twice already in the House. You can see who's voting yes to fund TSA agents, to fund the people at the Department of Homeland Security who work every day to keep us safe here in America. All the Republicans, almost every Republican voting yes, every one on March 5th. Almost every Democrat voted no on March 5th, voted no to shut the department down. The Democrats shut this down, Madam Speaker. Then we brought another vote. And you could see, well, January 22nd was the first vote. Almost a party line vote. Republicans voting yes to fund the department, Democrats voting no. March 5th, same thing. Republicans voting yes to fund the department, Democrats overwhelmingly voting no to shut it down. Now, there's a day today where they can seek redemption and stand up for those workers, the TSA agents, who are showing up for work and not getting paid. Do you know that if you're a TSA agent in America this fiscal year, Madam Speaker, you have gone 49% of this year without a paycheck? That's disgraceful. Disgraceful that Democrats have voted time and time again to deny them pay. For those especially who are showing up to do this hard work, you've got Americans waiting in line for hours and hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. At my home airport in New Orleans, people were sleeping overnight so they'd have a chance to make their flight. There are people waiting over 3 hours and still missing a flight, Madam Speaker, to go maybe on a family vacation. Maybe they've got to go to a funeral or a wedding. This is disrupting the lives of real people. Let me tell you what the TSA chief testified to yesterday, just yesterday. The TSA chief said, she told lawmakers that, quote, their agents have received eviction notices, lost their child care, missed bill payments, and been charged late fees, damaged their credit, defaulted on loans, and have been unable to even qualify for a loan to help ease the financial burden during the shutdown. Close quote. That was testimony given yesterday. And it's totally avoidable. That kind of pain should not be inflicted on our federal workers, and yet you can see the party line vote time and time again. Like today when we bring a bill to say, let's just give these people the checks for the work that they're doing. We can all have disagreements over how government operates. Go look at the changes President Trump has already made at the Department of Homeland Security. This week we got a new secretary. There have been dramatic changes to the department. In fact, changes both sides have made or have asked for have been made. And yet Democrats don't want to take yes for an answer, Madam Speaker, because they want chaos. Let's just call it for what it is. They want open borders. They want chaos. And we're going to give them an opportunity to do the right thing because the American people are sick and tired of it. And they should be. But there's going to be a moment of accountability real soon. In about an hour, you'll be able to see, America will be able to see who's voting yes to fund these people that are working so hard and who's voting no to keep the chaos going, to keep the long lines going. Now, I'd like to say I'm going to read you some good news. I want to read you a quote from Hakeem Jeffries, Madam Speaker. I think this is an important quote that everybody should listen to right now. This is Hakeem Jeffries, and I quote, "We are here today to do a single job, and that should be to fund fully the Department of Homeland Security. Anything else is an abdication of our responsibility. Anything else is an act of legislative malpractice. We're playing political games at a time when the safety and the security of the American people is being threatened." Close quote. That's Hakeem Jeffries, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, that was Hakeem Jeffries from February of 2015. What happened to that Hakeem Jeffries? How will Hakeem Jeffries of 2026 vote? The previous two times, we know, Madam Speaker, the vote was no. But in 2015, said it would be an act of malpractice to shut this department down. And let's talk about what times we're in. Some people want to think that we're at September 10th mentality, a pre-September 11th mentality. We're at a heightened state of alert right now. We've actually had Madam Speaker, 4 terrorist attacks on our American homeland in the last month. This department is more critical than ever, and this is when Democrats choose to shut it down, to put Americans at risk. It's dangerous. It's not just cruel to these workers who are going without pay. They testified yesterday that there are some TSA agents sleeping in their car because they can't afford rent. That's cruel, but it's also dangerous to this country to shut down this department at a time like this. Don't go back to a pre-September 11th mentality. This department was created for a reason, to protect the homeland so we don't ever have a September 11th again. Never forget. Remember that mantra? Seems like some people want to forget, have forgotten. Maybe they have amnesia. Maybe they need to remember that quote from the Democrat leader back in 2015 who said it would be political malpractice to vote to shut this agency down. Let's do the right thing. Let's everybody, not just Republicans today, let's have Republicans and Democrats join together and do what's needed to protect America's homeland. Vote yes on Congressman Ciscomani's bill to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. Get this back open. Bring common sense back into this country. With that, I urge a yes vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Let me just make a couple of quick points here. I think I said earlier, it was the TSA administrator yesterday who confirmed that the department made the decision not to pay TSA workers. In addition to that, the Department of Homeland Security has a $10 billion slush fund that comes from the Republicans' big, beautiful bill. They could dip into that slush fund to pay TSA screeners if the Trump administration chose to do so. By the way, this is the same account that former Secretary Noem used to buy 2 luxury jets for her use and to rent at $20,000 a horse so she could ride atop it in her ads. If she can do that, that the new secretary could use this $10 billion slush fund to pay TSA screeners. They have chosen not to do it. They're not shedding any tears for those workers. It is false. It is politics. It is a cudgel. And they are using them and playing them for political reasons. Again, they choose not to pay them. And so it falls to us. Yes, it falls to us. Everyone in this room wants to pay TSA employees and Coast Guard and FEMA. My bill does that. It actually does it. The bill before us does not do this. Let's be reasonable. We have done this before. When parts of the government were closed and we thought that some should open. We did it for food inspectors because our food should be inspected so that people can get access to it. We've done it for military pay. Why aren't we doing it for TSA employees? We could do that today. And you know what? We don't need a discharge petition. We need the Speaker of the House to take this bill and bring it to the floor. And I would bet you dollars to donuts that, in fact, we would have overwhelming support from Democrats and Republicans in passing it. And then TSA and FEMA and the Coast Guard and cybersecurity and Secret Service can get paid for the job that they are doing. I reserve.
Gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to my very good friend, the gentleman from Nevada, distinguished chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee, the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Amadei.
The gentleman from Nevada is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Minority Leader. Well, here we are again. It's going to come as a surprise to nobody here that as the chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee, I am rising in support of the 2026 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. Later today, we'll vote on the bill for a 3rd time, and unfortunately, it won't be the charm. This shutdown should have never happened. The committee negotiated a full bill on a bicameral, bipartisan basis, and then the goalposts got moved at the north end of the building. Now our colleagues have taken the department hostage over radical and unachievable policy demands which never would have made it into the original bill. This is a smokescreen for what we're really talking about here. Stopping immigration enforcement. Stopping immigration enforcement. Most Americans support removing dangerous criminal aliens from our communities. Stopping immigration enforcement. Most Americans support removing those who have final orders of removal instead of stopping immigration enforcement. But apparently, there's a new priority on the other side of the aisle. We're in day 40 of the shutdown with no apparent end in sight. And you know, I find it interesting that we keep hearing about the wonderful idea and the discharge petition, which is H.R. 7481. Well, I've read H.R. 7481. And if it was, as we like to say in the appropriations business, a clean bill, just funded those other ones, you know what? I think my distinguished colleague would have a good point. You know what's not in there? Don't ask me why. I didn't draft it. No body-worn camera money. That was one of the things everybody agreed on. Not in H.R. 7481. By the way, this is an act of oversight, whether you agree with it or not. You know what's not in H.R. 7481? All sorts of pre-existing, previously agreed to oversight provisions. This is about stopping immigration enforcement. So how many of us would miss the paychecks that those folks at TSA have missed and still continue to work? Good question. Who knows what the answer to that is? Over 400 TSA officers have quit since the beginning of the shutdown. Can't really blame them. The solution is to pick and choose which agencies at DHS get funded to ease the pain they created to alleviate their guilt for the hardship they've caused to our hardworking national security professional. No, the right call is to fund the entire department. We can all vote to do that again today. The time to fund the Department of Homeland Security is now. That's not news to anybody. That's the position. I urge my colleagues to do the right thing, vote yes, and